We need to get started. Our service is running concurrently with the service in Portland. Please be seated. If you please be seated. Yes, a chatty day. Okay, let's see. We join with other UUs in the tradition of striking the gong 3 times, once in memory of those congregants who have gone before, once in honor of those here today, and once for those who will come in the future. Our service today is connected with the service in Portland, which has already started. We're going to have a little concurrence issue, so we have to get moving, as they say. Good morning on this Sunday, June 16th. I'm Larry High, your service leader for today. Welcome to the Umpqua Unitarian Universalist congregation. We're glad you're here with us today. Whomever you are, whoever you love, however you describe or name the holy, you are welcome here. We especially welcome those visiting for the first time. The announcements are in our order of service. Please note the Pride Parade and the wonderful theatrical presentation by Roy Zimmerman. Much appreciation goes to our staff, our greeters, and our media tech, Jack Tranter. We're now going to have the fish collection. Here at UUC, we collect contributions of food or money in support of the fish pantry. This is a combined effort of several Roseburg churches. We do this for those in need and who are hungry, ill, or without shelter in our town. Our church offertory will be later. We'd like to thank you for your gifts. They will definitely help others. We would also like to welcome our live streaming audience watching from home. And now it's time for our chalice lighting. The words today are by Adam Slate. It's entitled Honoring Our Common Connection with Our Uniqueness. We gather this morning as one community, a community united by common ideals: love, justice, diversity, freedom, mutual care, and equity. Yet look around. Look at the faces of those around you. Each face represents an individual, every one of us with our own story, needs, strengths, and faults. We light our chalice today honoring our common connection and also the uniqueness that lives within each of us. As mentioned previously, this is a unique service. We are now joining with the first Portland live service entitled Finding Out We Are Free. Jake will connect us. We begin with Portland's call to worship.
Into the work of healing. And my final announcement is next week is going to be a little bit different. On Sunday morning, we will be broadcasting the General Assembly worship at 10:15. We're moving our service 15 minutes earlier for the rest of the summer. And there'll be a watch party right here at the church in Buchanan, and you can also watch from home as well. Once again, all of you are welcome. All of you are welcome as you are in this community. Let us turn to our neighbors and extend hospitality. I'm going to start quantifying our greetings by the number of bells. That was a 3-bell greeting. And now, Reverend Tom will light our chalice, and if you're at home, we invite you to light a candle with us. And let us say together, we are Unitarian Universalists. We light this chalice in faith, in hope, and in love.
Words for our call to worship come from Maya Angelou. We are weaned from our timidity. In the flush of love's light, we dare to be brave. And suddenly we see that love costs all that we are and will ever be. Yet it is only love which sets us free. As we gather on this Father's Day, as we gather about to see the turning of the year, as we gather to mark Juneteenth, let us be together now in community. And let us sing together, "Let freedom span both east and west." Will you rise in body and in spirit? Our responsive reading this morning is from Robert Weston, Summer Meditation. Now blows the wind with soft, relaxing warmth. The sun beats down, the schools are out. Children swim in the playgrounds and the streets, and eager city folk, vacation-bound, crowd the broad highways. The lakes and seashores lose their solitude, and all the world seems turned to carnival. What of ourselves? There could be now deep peace, a time of soul searching. We might turn to examine our own lives, to sort and probe our tendencies of thought, to sift the true from the false in the things of doubt, the beautiful from ugliness unmarked. The sun beats down. It is time for pause. Even the trees seem resting for a time, as if to meditate and gather strength for the more strenuous times that lie ahead. And shall not we? Here's the unfinished clay, half molded, that still waits on us to think that we have been, and as we are, still yet have to become. Please join now in our doxology, Spirit of Life.
I want to share about our offering throughout the month of June. We are sharing our plate offering with Street Books. Street Books is a bicycle-powered mobile library serving people living outside and at the margins in Portland. Since 2011, Street Books has provided books, reading glasses, and other survival supplies to create relationships and a community of mutual care. They strive to empower people on the streets through access to literature and to create a community of support for people living outside through a shared love of books. If you'd like to donate via check or cash, our ushers will be coming around in just a moment. If you'd like to give electronically, you can find the QR code on the screen and also on the yellow slips in one of the racks in front of you. And if you're on Boxcast, you can also use the Donate Now button. Thank you for your generosity. It moves people in our community and makes a difference. We make space each week in our service to name the concerns of our community life. We are a caring community, and pastoral support is offered through our ministers and our lay ministers throughout the week. That care includes holding your prayers, offering pastoral appointments, and offering companions who move with you through times of trial and challenge. If you are here in person, you can light a candle of intention in one of our galleries and write down your prayer. And online, you can send that prayer intention to prayer@firstunitarianportland.org. We do have a few parish concerns to share aloud at this time. Our chancel flowers today are in honor of Mary Bothwell, who was a member of and loved this church from 1960 to 2024. Mary's memorial service and her legacy was celebrated yesterday in our Elliott Chapel. An update on member Benno Phillipson. Benno entered hospice care this week after suffering a stroke on June 2nd. He is receiving care where he and his wife, Gail Durham, live. Let us hold both of them in this tender time. Longtime member Vicki Flaumer would like her church community to know that she underwent a heart ablation procedure this past Friday to help the heart maintain a normal rhythm. The procedure itself went well, although she experienced serious allergic reactions to the medications. She remains at St. Vincent Providence Hospital and hopes to return home today, Sunday. She's not quite up to having visitors or phone calls, but she does welcome your prayers and would love to receive some cards. Congregants can contact the church office for her mailing address. Let us continue in a spirit of prayer and reflective meditation. Spirit of life, flow in us and through us and all around us. Enliven our twin commitments to freedom and to love, which, when held jointly, lead us onward on the path of liberation. On this weekend leading up to Juneteenth, renew our individual and collective commitments to counter oppression in our community, in our city, in our country, and in our world. It is time to elevate the global majority. On today, Father's Day, reinvigorate our efforts to support healthy and thriving families with access to quality shelter, nourishment, health care, education, and self-determination. Buoy up everyone who is worthy of the name father or mentor, and parents and guardians of every gender. On this Sunday, before our General Assembly begins, lift up the people of our faith and elevate our conversations and decisions about how to express our highest ideals and what actions to take together in the future. Allow us to rise with our partners towards a brighter tomorrow. And in this time of transition in our congregation, Awaken in us the capacity to do that work of healing and holding, of listening, learning, and growing, and of centering a love that will not let us go or let us off the hook. A love that always calls us forward towards our better selves. All these things and so many others are our prayers, our yearnings, our meditations. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be. And now I invite you into a time of silence. Let us fill up the sanctuary with all our prayers and meditations. And let us sing together reflectively, O liberating rose. Our reading is Tending by Elizabeth Alexander. In the pull-out bed with my brother in my grandfather's Riverton apartment, my knees and ankles throbbed from growing, pulsing so hard they kept me awake. Or was it the Metro North train cars flying past the apartment, rocking the walls? Or was it the sound of apartment front doors as heavy as prison doors clanging shut? Was the Black Nation whispering to me from the Jet magazines stacked on the floor? Or was it my brother's unfamiliar ions vibrating, humming in his easeful sleep? Tomorrow, as always, grandfather will rise to the Spanish town cock's crow deep in his head and perform his usual ablutions and prepare the apartment for the day and peel fruit for us and prepare a hot meal that can take us anywhere and onward. Did sleep elude me because I could feel the heft of unuttered love in his tending our small bodies? Love, a silent mammoth thing that overwhelmed me, that kept me awake as my growing bones did, growing larger than anything else I would know. Come down.
This coming week, we will mark Juneteenth, a relatively new federal holiday in our country. It was signed into law by President Biden just in 2021. But the day, Juneteenth, has been marked, especially in Texas, for many, many years. The story begins on what has been called Freedom's Eve, or on the eve of January 1st, 1863, the first watch night services took place. On that night, enslaved and free African Americans gathered in churches and private homes across the country, awaiting news that the Emancipation Proclamation had actually taken effect. Lincoln had signed the proclamation 4 months earlier, and in those 4 months, the country prepared for that. At the stroke of midnight, prayers were answered as all enslaved people in Confederate states were declared legally free. Union soldiers, many of whom were black, marched onto plantations across cities in the South, reading small copies of the Emancipation Proclamation, spreading news of freedom in Confederate states. But not everyone in Confederate territory would immediately be free, of course. Even though the Emancipation Proclamation was made effective in 1863, it would not be implemented in places until still under Confederate control. Now, as a result of that, the westernmost Confederate state of Texas, enslaved people would not be free until much, much later, more than 2 years later. Freedom finally came on June 19, 1865, when some 2,000 Union troops arrived in Galveston Bay, Texas. The Army announced that the more than 250,000 enslaved black people in the state were free by executive decree. This came to be known as Juneteenth by newly freed people in Texas. So why did it take so long for word to reach Texas? There are a number of theories, I understand. By some accounts, a messenger on his way to Texas with the news was murdered. By other accounts, the good news of freedom was deliberately withheld by slaveholders who did not want to acknowledge it. Still others surmise that federal troops delayed in order for the slave owners to get through one more cotton harvest, a 19th century version of preserving the economy at all costs. Whatever the reason, news was a long time coming. Now, this is a wonderful story, one that I know I didn't learn until just a few years ago. But like so many things, the reality of what followed there in Texas and all over the country was, I think, a lot more complex. It can be easy to romanticize this story, but what we know is the legacy of slavery is anything but a simple narrative. Truth is, we want to tell the story that one day African Americans were enslaved and one day they were not. Truth is that it couldn't always necessarily be that simple. What we know is that the legacy of slavery lives on through this day. But when that news came, it didn't mean things necessarily changed all that much for most. Truth is, the systems of violence and brutality that were very much in place before the proclamation were still very much in place after it. Being free didn't suddenly mean you were actually free. If anything, the news shook things up and only made those in power more inclined to keep that power. There was hope in the post-emancipation years known as Reconstruction from 1865 to 1877. It was a period marked by hope, but also uncertainty and struggle for the nation as a whole. Now, in that period, formerly enslaved people immediately sought to reunify their families, to establish schools and run for political office, push legislation, and even sue slaveholders for compensation. But given the 200 plus years of enslavement, such changes were nothing short of amazing. Not even a generation out of slavery, African Americans were inspired and empowered to transform their lives and their country. But those 200 plus years also meant that the patterns of oppression were well established and were not going to go away easily. And indeed, that legacy, we know all too well, lives on yet today. It lives in the way African Americans still don't have the freedom so many of us do. It lives on in the systems that can be so very, very difficult to transform. The Juneteenth holiday was passed not long, of course, after the murder of George Floyd and the uprisings around our country for justice. So where are we now some years later? What does all of that look like? Progress has been made, yes, but we also know, too, there is so much that needs to be done. Just what does this mean for us today? Scholars like Ruth Wilson Gilmore rightly caution overly simplistic analogies between contemporary and historical systems of oppression. The abolition of chattel slavery is not the same as the abolition of prisons. Incarceration is not exactly the same as slavery. But at the same time, it is clear that so many systems of surveillance and violence and criminalization, dehumanization, displacement, and premature death were perfected in the systems of slavery, and they can still be sustained by our current landscape. To that end, the scholar Gilmore asked this question: as it was then, now as it was then, where do we go from here? What brilliant imaginative things can we think up? What lingering attachments to oppression threaten us still? Who's coming along? And just how shall we go about this? From my own privileged location, I can't begin to imagine just what it was like for those slaves to learn they were free. Free? When you've been kept captive and all the fear and threat that goes with it, I can't really imagine. So just what does it mean to be free here now in our times? I can't help but compare the story of Exodus when the Hebrew slaves were suddenly freed by Pharaoh. They had little time to prepare. They didn't quite know what to do. But all of a sudden, they were free. But the Hebrews find themselves in the wilderness. Yes, they're free, but they're in this strange land. They're tired and hungry and thirsty. All of a sudden, captivity, well, maybe it doesn't seem quite so bad. At least they knew that what each day would bring. They had few conveniences that weren't around now in the wilderness. Captivity, we come to learn, at least was what was known. The future was anything but known. And that's such an important part of the story, I think. Freedom's not always as great as it might first appear. It can bring with it risk, maybe danger, maybe even death, but most of all, the unknown. With freedom, we're asked to take responsibility in ways that perhaps we've not been asked to take responsibility before. Now, most of us, I expect, don't spend a whole lot of time reflecting on just how it is we are free or how it is we're not free. We go about the tasks of living, buying the groceries, getting the kids off to school, doing our work, tending our assignments, keeping in touch with those in our closest circles. We watch as one season passes into another and as one chapter of our lives pass into another. The reason that one of the Hebrew stories is told every year at Passover is because it's one of those stories that needs to be told and retold every year and for every generation. In that story, we are reminded that the liberation was not just something that happened back in the history books. The Passover story is told every year because every year it's a matter of not only remembering that release from slavery in Egypt, but remembering that every generation has its way too of being enslaved. Each of us needs to ask how we are free, but also perhaps how it is we're still held captive. That captivity can come in many forms. We're held captive by the violence in our world, in our own city, in so much of what comes across our screens every single day. We're held captive when some don't have the same opportunities as everyone else, when not everyone has access to the kind of education that another person has, or when one person can get a good paying job and another simply can't. And there are some very personal ways that we are held in captivity too, like when we let old hurts keep us from being in good relationships with ourselves and with others around us, like those fears that can so easily hold us captive. So often, it may be that we really don't feel free, and that plays out in a sense of apathy, in depression, in cynicism, in the ways that can keep us so isolated from other people. And in the end, we may not feel as if we have a whole lot of power in the world, even with our privilege. In the end, our sense of isolation may only deepen. Juneteenth was passed in the months following the George Floyd murder. It was a time when it felt like the country was turning in ways that it hadn't before when it comes to working our way through that legacy of slavery. But truth is, in these years, we've only been reminded of just how slow progress can be. We so often want stories that can end neatly and succinctly. But the truth is, life is rarely like that. Hearing the story of Juneteenth made me think of the complex mix of stories we have today, the polarization in our country and in our world. I don't know about you, but sometimes I don't quite know where it is that I can enter that conversation. Maybe that's why it's important to simply keep telling that story. A few days ago, I had occasion to talk with a 25-year-old who's important in my life, a good kid, a thoughtful kid, a jock. And what I heard from him was a deep cynicism about the state of our times. Now, when it comes to the election, he doesn't really see any difference between the two presidential candidates. And it made me deeply sad to hear that and how distanced he feels from our whole system. Now, that conversation was not a surprise, but it did make me terribly sad. Perhaps it hits home because I want to look at his generation and see the way forward. I want to see hope emerge from him and from those around him. But it was also a reminder that the future is not just in the hands of the young, it is in the hands of all of us. For many of us, I think our relative privilege can sometimes get in the way. As a white person with a good income and good home, it's easy not to have to pay attention. I wonder sometimes, is there a way that we as Americans can be held captive by our relative comfort that most of us, many of us, are privileged to live in? We can get attached to our things, and in having what we do, maybe we don't want to lose it. Maybe we simply, first of all, want to make sure that that comfort will continue. But does that comfort only help us keep the status quo in place? I think that it's somewhere in that spiritual challenge that the spiritual challenge actually lies. It starts with the basic recognition of our interdependence, to see ourselves and to see our lives as connected inevitably with the lives of others. Even with so many questions, what we do know is that one person's freedom is so very much connected with another's freedom. It may be too often that freedom simply comes, when we talk about freedom, that we simply are talking about our own. Freedom from intrusion, freedom from want. All that is important. There's also a way that our comfort can so easily help us lose sight on the person next to us, to another person. What I have may well come at a cost, but just what does that cost mean? How do I see my own life in the larger context of history? And how will my actions affect that larger movement towards freedom? This movement towards our own and the larger community struggle for freedom is something primarily that I think is a spiritual challenge. It's about coming to see how what I do is very much connected with something larger than myself. It's not just about me, about all those I'm connected with, but it's how my actions affect the planet we all live on. It's how my actions affect the generation that will follow. As Reverend Allison said, this coming week, the Unitarian Universalist Association General Assembly will take place. It will be virtual this year. The main topic on the agenda will be a vote on proposed revisions to what is called Article 2 of the UUA bylaws. Now, that's the part that holds our principles and purposes that have been in place for some 40 years. They're being revised, and there's been what I think we can call a lively debate about all of that. A core part of that change, or the proposed change, is a call to put love at the center of our faith. And around that is a set of principles to guide our life together. For me, that articulation of love at the center of our faith has been important. For one thing, I think there might actually be what we call that elevator speech that can come with that, that's a little, not quite as long as trying to recite all 7 principles. But that love at the center concept points us back to that recognition of our interdependence. It points us back to that reality that we as individuals are, and our worth and dignity, of course, are very much interconnected with the context of the whole, with the larger community, with all of life around us. So here we are, once again about to mark this day we call June 13th. Like any holiday, hopefully it will be a time to pause. It will be a time to tell the story of how slavery ended, even if word didn't get out for a long time. But I also note that we will no doubt have corporate ads that put a warm and fuzzy place on this story. At least perhaps one of our tasks is to simply bear witness to how that legacy lives on and all the ways that we are asked to live that story out in our own lives, in our own actions, especially mindful of those most impacted, and freedom of some much larger community and some larger whole. Perhaps we need to ask what news it is we still need to hear. What news is it that we still need to learn? How is it that in the cacophony of our lives, we may be missing the messages that we most need to hear? May love center us as we continue on this journey. May it ground us as we find our way. May it hold us in our questions. May it hold us as we all, each of us and all of us, find our own way into freedom. May this be so for us this day. Amen. I invite you to join now in our closing hymn, Faith of the Larger Liberty.
Lord.
words again of Maya Angelou. We are weaned from our timidity. In the flush of love's light, we dare to be brave. And suddenly we see that love costs all we are and will ever be. Yet it is only love which sets us free. This is the day we've been given. Let us rejoice in it and be glad. Go in peace. Practice love. Amen.
Today in faith, that faith that knows no misunderstanding. May we all take our message out to the world. Lord, we have come today in love, in the consciousness of love, knowing that love is all that there is. There is no other power, no other presence, no other all-knowing intelligence. It's just that spirit of life. And it's in that spirit of life that we live, move, and have our being. May each of you be a shining light of that love that knows no misunderstanding. Please gather now in a circle of oneness as we sing our song, Go Lift It Up.
Oh